Welcome back, my friend. The lamps are lit, the wind has quieted, and somewhere in the shadows the Niffler has found something shiny again. But this time, it's not gold. It's a story, and tonight, he's ready to share it with you. So settle in and listen closely. It begins like this.
The October morning wrapped Hogwarts in a golden veil of mist that rose slowly from the lake like the breath of a sleeping dragon. Molly Prewett descended the wide stone steps toward the great hall, her footsteps echoing through the empty corridors of the castle. Torchlight danced on the walls, casting soft shadows that seemed to come alive in the morning twilight. Seventh year always brought with it a particular atmosphere, a sense of ending and beginning all at once. Molly felt it in every cell of her body, as if the magic of the castle itself whispered to her about the changes to come. Her long red hair, gathered in a practical braid, gleamed in the light of the morning sun streaming through the stained glass windows. Unlike many of her classmates who had already begun to feel nostalgic about their school years, Molly looked ahead with determination and ambition burning in her brown eyes like an inner flame. The great hall gradually filled with students. The smell of fresh-baked rolls, fried bacon, and hot tea created a cozy atmosphere that always reminded Molly of home. She sat at the Gryffindor table, automatically scanning the hall with her eyes, a habit that had developed over years of studying at a school where magic could bring both wonder and danger. "Did you hear the news about little Bailey from Ravenclaw?" came a whisper behind her. Molly leaned closer imperceptibly, listening to the conversation between two fifth-year girls. "That second year? They say she's fallen ill with something strange. Madame Pomfrey can't even figure out what's wrong with her," replied one of the girls, her voice filled with curiosity and mild fear. "And I heard she can't speak at all. Can you imagine? Just woke up one morning, and that was it, not a sound." "As if someone stole her voice," added the other, lowering her voice to a dramatic whisper. Molly felt something tighten in her chest. Luna Bailey, she knew this girl. A small, curious second year with large blue eyes who always sat in the library with stacks of books bigger than herself. A child who reminded Molly of herself at a younger age, when the whole world seemed filled with magical secrets waiting to be discovered. "They say the professors even called in consultants from St. Mungo's," continued the first girl. "But even they can't do anything. Never seen anything like it." Molly rose from the table, forgetting her half-eaten breakfast. Her instincts, sharpened by years of studying defensive charms and combat magic, screamed that something was wrong here. An illness that neither the school nurse nor the healers at St. Mungo's could cure. This smelled of magic, and not the good kind. The corridors of Hogwarts had never seemed as long as they did this morning when she headed toward the hospital wing. Her steps rang rhythmically on the stone floor, while thoughts swarmed in her head like a disturbed beehive. Molly had always had a weakness for younger students. Perhaps it was part of her nature, that trait of character she hadn't yet fully understood. The doors to the hospital wing were slightly ajar, and through the gap seeped the quiet murmur of Madame Pomfrey. Molly knocked politely, waiting for permission to enter. "Come in," came the familiar voice of the nurse, though there was a note of fatigue and concern in it. The hospital wing always smelled of disinfecting potions and fresh herbal tinctures, but today there was another scent in the air, subtle, almost imperceptible aroma of something unusual, like wilting flowers or a candle about to go out. Madame Pomfrey stood by one of the beds, her usually neat gray hair slightly disheveled, and her face showed helplessness, an emotion Molly had never seen on the face of the experienced nurse. "Miss Prewett," Madame Pomfrey greeted her, turning around. "What brings you here so early?" "I heard about Luna Bailey," Molly replied, her voice soft but determined. "I wanted to know if there was anything I could do to help." The nurse sighed heavily, her shoulders dropping. "I'm afraid there's nothing to be done here, child. This is something I've never encountered in all my years of work." Molly approached the bed where Luna lay. The girl looked small and fragile under the white hospital blanket. Her usually bright blue eyes were dim, as if part of life had simply evaporated from them. She stared at the ceiling, her lips moving soundlessly, as if she was trying to say something, but the words couldn't find their way out. "What happened?" Molly asked, sitting down on a chair beside the bed. 3 days ago she didn't appear for breakfast." Madame Pomfrey began to recount, her voice monotonous with fatigue. "They found her in the Ravenclaw dormitory, just lying there, staring at one spot. Can't speak, barely responds to external stimuli. But the strangest thing, The nurse paused, searching for the right words. The strangest thing? Molly prompted. Her magical aura. It's weakening. Every day it becomes less noticeable, as if something is sucking the very magic out of her. These words struck Molly like lightning. She instinctively reached toward Luna, but stopped a few inches from her skin. Even without touching the girl, she could feel what Madame Pomfrey was talking about. Luna's aura was indeed weak, flickering like a candle in the wind. What does Professor Dumbledore say? Molly asked. He's concerned. Very concerned. Nothing like this has happened before. Not here, not in other magical schools. The healers at St. Mungo's are also at a dead end. Molly stood up, her mind already beginning to analyze the situation. A weakening magical aura, loss of voice, general debilitation. This reminded her of something from defense against the dark arts classes, but she couldn't recall a specific answer. Madame Pomfrey, did Luna mention where she had been the last time before this happened to her? The nurse thought for a moment. Her friends say she went for a walk in the evening. She liked to walk near the edge of the Forbidden Forest. She collected plants there for her research projects. Smart child, always careful, was careful. The Forbidden Forest. Molly felt a chill run down her spine. The forest always harbored dangers, but usually they were more straightforward. Wild animals, tangled paths, sometimes dark creatures. But something that could drain magic? This was something new. Let me stay with her for a while, Molly requested. Madame Pomfrey hesitated, then nodded. Not for long. And if you notice any changes, tell me immediately. When the nurse went to her office, Molly carefully took Luna's hand in her palms. The girl's skin was cold, almost lifeless. Molly closed her eyes and concentrated, allowing her own magical energy to gently touch Luna's aura. What she felt made her jerk her hands back sharply. It was like touching emptiness, not just weakness or illness, but real, horrible nothingness. As if part of Luna's soul had simply vanished. What are you doing here? Molly spun around sharply. Arthur Weasley stood in the doorway of the hospital wing, his red hair disheveled and his face showing concern. He was also a seventh-year Gryffindor. Molly knew him. Who wouldn't know Arthur Weasley with his tireless curiosity and fascination with everything related to magic? Arthur, she greeted him, trying to hide her surprise at his unexpected appearance. What brings you here? Luna, she's from Ravenclaw, he replied, approaching closer. I heard that one of the younger students, that something's wrong with her. His voice grew quieter. Is it true? Can she really not speak? Molly nodded, looking again at the motionless figure of the girl. Worse. Madame Pomfrey says her magical aura is weakening. Something is taking her magic away. Arthur drew in his breath sharply. His blue eyes widened with surprise and fear. Taking magic away? But that's impossible. Magic is part of ourselves. It can't just be taken away. Apparently it can, Molly replied grimly. The question is what or who is doing this. Arthur moved closer to the bed, his gaze focused and analytical. What do the professors say? Dumbledore must know what this is. If he knew, Luna would already be healthy, Molly replied with bitterness in her voice. Madame Pomfrey says even the healers at St. Mungo's are at a dead end. Arthur fell silent, his mind obviously working at full speed. Molly watched him, noting how his face immediately became serious when he concentrated. Previously, she hadn't paid much attention to Arthur. He was a quiet student absorbed in his research, who spent more time in the library than at common events. Where was she when this happened to her? He finally asked. Near the Forbidden Forest, collecting plants for her research. The Forbidden Forest, Arthur repeated thoughtfully. There are many unusual creatures there. Perhaps she encountered something new, something unknown. Molly turned to him, a spark of interest flashing in her eyes. Do you think it's a magical creature? Perhaps. Or something even worse. You know, I've read about cases where dark wizards created artificial creatures to collect magical energy. But that was very long ago, in medieval times. Artificial creatures? Molly became alert. Yes, like magical parasites. Creatures that feed on the magic of other beings. But knowledge of how to create them was lost centuries ago. At least, I thought so. Molly felt everything tighten in her stomach with worry. If Arthur was right, then Luna might not be the only victim. And if this creature was really somewhere in the Forbidden Forest. We need to go there, she said decisively. What? To the Forbidden Forest? Arthur looked at her in surprise. Molly, it's forbidden for good reason. It's dangerous even during the day, and if there really is something there that can steal magic. All the more reason to act quickly, Molly interrupted him. before this creature finds new victims. She looked at Luna again, and her heart clenched with pain. The girl looked so helpless, so small. Something deep inside Molly, an instinct she didn't yet fully understand, screamed that she had to protect this child, that it was her duty. "Arthur," she said, turning back to him, "you understand magical creatures well, and you have incredible intuition about unusual magical phenomena. And I know defensive charms well. Together we have a better chance of finding an answer." Arthur was silent, looking first at her, then at Luna. In his eyes, an internal struggle was taking place between common sense and the desire to help. "You're right," he said finally, "but we must be careful. If this really is something that can steal magic, we need to act wisely." "I already have a plan," Molly replied with determination in her voice. "Tonight, after dinner, meet me at the entrance to the castle." "Molly, are you sure? This could be very dangerous." She looked once more at Luna's helpless figure, and determination flashed in her eyes. "I'm sure. This child needs help, and waiting for adults to find a solution might be too late." Arthur nodded, though concern was still readable in his eyes. "All right, but let's be careful and rely on our instincts." When Arthur left, Molly sat down next to Luna again. She carefully took the girl's cold hand in her palms, feeling that horrible emptiness that seemed to absorb everything living around it. "Don't worry," she whispered. "I'll find whoever did this to you, and I'll return what was taken from you." Outside the hospital wing window, leaves began to turn yellow and fall, as if nature itself felt that something wrong had happened in the magical world of Hogwarts. And somewhere far away, in the depths of the forbidden forest, something dark and hungry waited for nightfall. In the evening, when the castle was plunged into silence and most students had gone to their dormitories, Molly stood by the great oak doors that led outside. Her heart beat faster with excitement and fear, but determination did not leave her. In the pocket of her robes lay her wand, and in her head was a plan that, she hoped, would help save Luna. Footsteps in the corridor announced Arthur's approach. He walked toward her with a determined expression on his face, ready for what lay ahead. In that moment, Molly realized she hadn't been wrong to trust him. Perhaps for the first time in all her years at Hogwarts, she wouldn't be acting alone. "Ready?" Arthur asked quietly. "Ready," Molly replied, and together they stepped into the cold October night, toward the mystery that awaited them in the darkness of the forbidden forest. The cold October night air struck Molly sharply in the face as she and Arthur stepped out of the castle. The moon hung over the forbidden forest as a thin silver crescent, casting ghostly light on the frost-covered grass. Each step echoed in the silence, as if the earth itself was warning them of what lay ahead. Molly gripped her wand tightly in her right hand, feeling her own magical energy pulsing through it. Ready for defense, ready for battle. "Here," Arthur said quietly, stopping at the edge of the forest where the path disappeared into the darkness between tall oaks and pines. If Luna was collecting plants, she would have taken this path. This is where the rarest herbs used for potion-making grow. Molly listened to his words, marveling at how well he knew the forest. Arthur had always seemed more of a theorist than a practitioner to her, but now he moved with confidence, as if he knew exactly where to go. "How do you know these places so well?" she asked as they entered under the canopy of trees. "I come here often," Arthur replied, carefully examining the ground beneath their feet. "Not deep, of course, but enough to know the safe paths. I like to observe magical creatures in their natural habitat." The forest surrounded them with its mysteries and whispers. Ancient trees rose around them like silent sentries that had guarded their secrets for centuries. Leaves rustled underfoot, and somewhere in the darkness night birds conversed. The smell of earth, wet leaves, and something ancient, almost forgotten, filled the air. "Lumos," Molly whispered, and the tip of her wand glowed with soft white light. Arthur repeated the spell, and now they had enough light to see the path ahead. They walked in silence for about 10 minutes when Arthur suddenly stopped, raising his hand for silence. Molly froze, listening. At first she heard nothing unusual, the same night sounds of the forest. But then she noticed what had alarmed Arthur. The silence was too deep. The birds had fallen silent. Not even the rustling of small animals in the undergrowth could be heard. "Magic," Arthur said quietly. "Do you feel it?" Molly concentrated, allowing her senses to expand beyond ordinary perception. And then she felt it, something wrong in the forest's atmosphere, as if the air had become thicker, as if the very magic around them was distorted. "There," she pointed with her wand to the left of the path, where a faint, unnatural glow flickered between the trees. They carefully made their way through the bushes. avoiding branches that might betray them. The glow became brighter, but at the same time more unstable, as if it was struggling against something trying to extinguish it. What they saw in the small clearing made both of them gasp sharply. The ground was covered with strange patterns, not carved or drawn, but as if burned directly into the soil. Lines intertwined with each other in complex patterns that resembled ancient runes, but were much darker and more sinister. In the center of this strange circle lay several withered plants, the same rare herbs that Luna might have been collecting for her research. "Good God," Molly whispered. "What is this?" Arthur approached the edge of the circle, but didn't cross the boundary of the burned lines. "I've never seen anything like this, but I can feel how the magic here is distorted, as if something sucked it right out of the earth." Molly carefully extended her hand toward the circle, but immediately pulled it back. "It's cold here. Not ordinary cold, but something deeper, as if the very life force has evaporated. Look," Arthur pointed to the plants in the center. "They haven't just withered. They're empty, as if not only life was taken from them, but their very essence." Molly studied the patterns on the ground carefully. Something about them seemed familiar, but she couldn't remember where she might have seen them. "Arthur, don't you think that?" She didn't get to finish her sentence. From the darkness of the forest came a sound, not the usual rustling of leaves or an animal's step, but something else. Like a whisper of wind, but without wind. Like breathing, but too quiet and at the same time too loud. Both instinctively raised their wands, preparing to defend themselves. The light from the tips of their magical instruments became brighter, driving shadows away from the trees around them. And then they saw it. At first it seemed like just a shadow, something darker than the usual darkness between the trees. But then this shadow began to move, taking on outlines that were difficult to describe in words. It wasn't a concrete form, rather the non-concreteness of form itself. Something that constantly changed, flowed, as if made of living darkness. But the most terrible thing was that this creature radiated the same cold as the circle on the ground. Cold that reached not the skin, but the soul. "Spirit thief," Arthur whispered, his voice trembling with fear and fascination at the same time. The creature, as if hearing its name, turned toward them. It had no eyes in the usual sense, but Molly felt it looking directly at her. And in that gaze was greed, not just hunger, but insatiable thirst for something that burned inside her. "Molly, don't move," Arthur said quietly. "It reacts to magical energy. The more we use magic, the stronger it." But it was already too late. The creature lunged toward them, moving not as ordinary beings move. It seemed to dissolve in the air in one place and appear in another, leaving trails of cold and emptiness behind it. Molly instinctively raised her wand. "Protego!" she shouted, and around her and Arthur appeared a bright shield of golden light. But when the creature touched the shield, something incredible happened. Instead of bouncing off or breaking against the protective spell, it began to absorb the very light of the shield. Golden sparks flowed toward it like water toward a drain, and the magical barrier began to weaken. "It's stealing the spell," Molly exclaimed, feeling her own magical power flowing out along with the shield. "Finite incantatum," Arthur quickly said, and the protective spell vanished before the creature could absorb all the energy from it. But now they were left without protection, and the spirit thief was approaching, having become noticeably larger and brighter after absorbing part of Molly's magic. Molly felt panic boiling in her chest, but forced herself to calm down. Years of studying combat magic and defensive charms hadn't been in vain. She had to think, not just react. "It feeds on magic," she said quickly to Arthur. "That means we can't use ordinary spells." "Then what?" Arthur asked, retreating with her toward the edge of the clearing. Molly thought frantically. What could affect a creature that fed on magical energy? And suddenly it occurred to her. "Arthur, do you have anything non-magical? A knife, a stone, anything?" He frantically searched his pockets. Only this. He pulled out a small metal object, a miniature muggle screw that he obviously collected. "Perfect." Molly took the screw and quickly whispered, "Forgive me for this, but I need your help in a different way." She threw the screw directly into the center of the creature. Of course, the metal object passed right through it without causing harm, but that wasn't the goal. The goal was to distract the spirit thief's attention for a second. At that same moment, Molly grabbed Arthur's hand. "Do you trust me?" "What are you? Do you trust me?" "Yes." Instead of using her wand, Molly concentrated on the most primitive, most natural type of magic, the kind that existed in wizards even before the invention of wands and spells. She imagined light, not as a spell, but as part of herself, as her inner warmth that opposed the creature's cold. And suddenly warm golden light flared from her hands, which still held Arthur's hand. Not the magical light of a spell, but something deeper, something more personal. Light that couldn't be taken away because it was part of herself. The creature recoiled sharply, as if burned. It began circling around them, looking for a way to approach, but the light that Molly radiated kept it at a distance. "How are you doing this?" Arthur whispered, looking at the light enveloping their joined hands. "I don't know," Molly answered honestly. I just think about what I want to protect. About Luna. About you. About everyone who might suffer from this creature." Arthur squeezed her hand tighter, and the light became brighter. "I'm thinking about that too," he said. "And you know what? I feel that it doesn't just steal magic. It collects it." "Collects? For what?" "I don't know. But look at it." Molly looked carefully at the spirit thief. Now, when the light was driving it away, she could better examine its structure. Inside the dark, shifting form something pulsed. Not a heart, but something like magical energy gathered together. "It doesn't dissipate the magic," she understood. "It accumulates it." "But why?" Suddenly the creature stopped. It no longer tried to approach them, but just froze as if listening to something. And then, as unexpectedly as it had appeared, it began to move away. "Where is it going?" Arthur whispered. But Molly already knew the answer, and this thought filled her with horror. For new victims. It sensed someone else. They stood silently, holding hands, while the light around them slowly faded. Only when the creature had completely disappeared into the forest darkness did Molly allow herself to relax. "We have to follow it," she said, but Arthur shook his head. "Not now. It knows where we are. If we pursue it, we might fall into a trap." He looked at her with admiration and some fear. "Molly, what you did, how did you create that light?" She untangled their hands, suddenly realizing they had been holding hands the entire time. A slight blush appeared on her cheeks. I don't know. I just felt that I needed to protect us, and something responded inside me." "That wasn't ordinary magic," Arthur said thoughtfully. "That was something older, deeper. My grandmother used to tell me about such things, about magic that comes from the heart itself, not from spells." Molly nodded, still feeling the echo of that warmth that had flared in her during the encounter with the creature. "And you helped me. I felt your support, your strength." Arthur looked at her in surprise. "Really?" "Yes. When you squeezed my hand, the light became brighter. As if your magic was amplifying mine." They fell silent again, realizing the significance of what had happened. Not only had they encountered the mysterious creature for the first time, but something new had arisen between them: trust, cooperation, mutual understanding. "Molly," Arthur said quietly, "I think we've encountered something much more serious than just a dangerous magical creature." "What do you mean?" "This circle on the ground, the way the creature collects magic. This reminds me of something from very old books. Something about rituals designed to accumulate magical energy for the purpose of..." "For the purpose of what?" Molly prompted. "Opening portals, or resurrecting something that should remain dead." A chill ran down Molly's spine. "You mean someone is using this creature to collect magic?" "Maybe. Or the creature itself is preparing for something bigger." They carefully left the clearing, returning along the same path toward the castle. But when they had almost reached the edge of the forest, they heard a sound that made them freeze with horror. It was a cry, not human but animal. A cry of pain and despair that suddenly cut off, as if someone had turned off the sound. "There." Arthur pointed in the direction from which the cry had come. They ran through the bushes, not paying attention to the branches that whipped their faces. In a small clearing not far from the path, they found what they had feared most. Two bodies lay on the grass, a small deer and something resembling a large owl. Both were alive, but only formally. Their eyes stared into nothingness, and from their bodies came the same cold as from the circle with burned runes. "It found them," Molly whispered, kneeling beside the deer. The animal was breathing, but very weakly, as if life was slowly flowing out of it. Arthur carefully touched the owl. Magical creatures. Both of them. They had strong natural magic, and now it's gone, Molly finished. Just like with Luna. They couldn't do anything for the animals. Their knowledge didn't extend to this type of magical exhaustion. All they could do was leave them in peace, and hope that nature would find a way to help them. "We have to go back," Arthur said when they were on the path to the castle again. "But now we at least know what we're dealing with." "Do we?" Molly looked at him skeptically. "A creature that steals magic. It operates according to a certain pattern, collecting energy for some purpose. And most importantly, it may be vulnerable to non-magical methods of fighting or to magic that comes not from spells, but from the heart itself. Molly nodded, thinking about the light she had created. But we still don't know how to help Luna, or how to stop this creature. No, but now we know where to look for answers. And we know we can work together. When they reached the castle, the eastern horizon was already beginning to lighten. Soon morning would come, and they would have to return to ordinary school life as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. They now knew about the existence of the spirit thief, about the danger lurking in the darkness of the forbidden forest. "Molly," Arthur said when they stopped at the entrance to the castle, "what happened tonight, that light you created? I've never seen anything like it." She looked at him, noting the sincerity in his blue eyes. "Me neither. But without you, I couldn't have done it. You helped me focus, you gave me strength. We helped each other," he said quietly. "And I think this is just the beginning." Molly nodded, feeling he was right. The fight with the spirit thief was only beginning, and they would have to work together if they wanted to save Luna and prevent whatever this creature was planning. When they parted to their dormitories, Molly couldn't fall asleep for a long time. She thought about the cold touch of the creature, about the warm light that had flared in her hands, and about Arthur's hand that had held hers firmly in the moment of greatest danger. And somewhere in the depths of the forbidden forest, the spirit thief continued to collect magical energy, preparing for something that could change the magical world forever. A new day had come, but the shadow of evil that hung over Hogwarts had become even darker. The following day proved unbearably long. Molly sat in transfiguration class, trying to concentrate on transforming a feather into a small harp that was meant to play a melody, but her thoughts constantly returned to the previous night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the image of the spirit thief, that terrible shadow that devoured magic and life. Even worse was the face of Luna, who grew paler and more distant with each passing hour. "Miss Prewett, could you explain why your feather remains a feather rather than a melodious harp?" Professor McGonagall asked sharply, approaching her desk. Molly startled, realizing that for the past 15 minutes she had simply been staring at an ordinary goose feather, without attempting to transform it. "I'm sorry, Professor. Something is troubling me." Professor McGonagall's stern face softened slightly. "I heard about Miss Bailey's condition, but the best way to help her is to continue your studies and trust the adults who are handling this problem." Molly nodded, but privately thought that the adults hadn't been able to help Luna so far. If she and Arthur didn't act, perhaps no one else would be able to. When the lesson finally ended, she quickly gathered her belongings and hurried to the library. She and Arthur had arranged to meet there at 2 o'clock to begin their research. The Hogwarts library always gave Molly a sense of peace and security. The tall shelves lined with thousands of books created a cozy labyrinth of knowledge. The scent of old parchment and leather mingled with the faint aroma of magic that emanated from the particularly ancient volumes. Sunlight fell gently through the tall windows, illuminating dancing dust motes in the air. Arthur was already waiting for her at one of the distant tables, surrounded by a pile of books. His red hair was disheveled, as if he had spent the entire morning buried in reading, and his face showed concentration and worry. "Found anything?" Molly asked quietly, settling beside him. "Perhaps," he replied without lifting his eyes from the open book. "But the most interesting material is probably in the restricted section, and we can't get there without a teacher's permission." Molly smiled mischievously. "Who says we need permission?" Arthur looked at her in surprise. "Molly, it's the restricted section for good reason. There are books on dark magic there, dangerous spells, and also answers that might save Luna," Molly interrupted. "Arthur, I've seen what this creature does. It doesn't just steal magic, it destroys people from within. We might not have time for official permissions." Arthur was silent, weighing the risks. Finally, he nodded. "All right, but how do we get in there? Madam Pants is always watching." "Leave that to me," Molly glanced around, ensuring the librarian was busy at the other end of the hall. "I have a plan." They waited until late evening, when the library was empty. Molly used a disillusionment charm that she had learned in defense against the dark arts. It didn't make them completely invisible, but significantly complicated detection in the library's semi-darkness. The restricted section was separated from the main part of the library by heavy iron bars. Magical locks and protective charms flickered on the metal with a faint violet light, warning of danger. "Alohomora," Molly whispered, directing her wand at the lock. Nothing happened. The lock didn't even budge. There are stronger protective charms here, Arthur said quietly. Something more powerful is needed. Molly concentrated, recalling spells her father had taught her. As a member of the Ministry of Magic, he knew several spells not taught at school. Portaberto, she pronounced, putting all her strength into the spell. The lock clicked, and the violet light extinguished. The bars slowly opened with a quiet screech. "How did you?" Arthur began. "I'll explain later," Molly whispered. Quickly. The restricted section seemed even more ancient than the main library. It was dark here, and the air was thick with magic. Not the kind, educational magic of ordinary textbooks, but something older, more complex, and potentially more dangerous. The books on the shelves seemed alive. Some trembled slightly, others whispered so softly that words couldn't be distinguished. "What are we looking for?" Arthur whispered, his wand glowing with dim light to avoid attracting unwanted attention. "Something about creatures that feed on magic, or about methods of collecting magical energy for dark rituals." They separated, searching different shelves. Molly read book titles, many written in languages she didn't understand. Secrets of the darkest arts, curses and their consequences, forgotten rituals of ancient times. "Molly here," Arthur called quietly. He stood by a particularly old shelf, holding a worn tome bound in black leather. Golden letters on the spine were barely visible. Artificial creatures and magical parasites. "This is it," Molly whispered, running to him. They carefully opened the book on the nearest table. The pages were yellowed with age, and ink in some places had nearly vanished. But the illustrations were still clear, and they made both gasp sharply. On one page was a drawing that exactly matched what they had seen in the forest. A dark, shifting form surrounded by patterns similar to those burned into the clearing's ground. "Here," Arthur began reading the ancient text. "The spiritual thief, a creature of unnatural origin, resulting from experiments by a wizard named Mordenkainen in 1456. Created to collect the magical essence of living beings for the purpose." His voice trailed off. "For what purpose?" Molly prompted. "For opening a portal to the dark dimension," Arthur finished reading, his face pale. "Molly, if this is true, we're not just dealing with a dangerous creature. This is part of an ancient, very dark ritual." Molly continued reading. "The spiritual thief accumulates magical energy within itself until reaching critical mass. When this occurs, the collected power is used to tear the veil between worlds, allowing entities from the dark dimension to penetrate our world." "Oh no," she whispered. "What happens to those whose magic it stole?" Arthur turned the page and found the answer. Without magical essence, the human soul gradually separates from the body. The victim first loses magical ability, then voice, then gradually disappears from the physical world until only an empty shell remains. Molly's heart stopped. "How long?" "Usually the process takes a week from first contact." Molly quickly calculated. Luna had fallen ill 4 days ago. 3 days remained, perhaps fewer. "Is there anything about how to stop it?" she asked, frantically turning pages. "Yes, here." Arthur pointed to a paragraph at the bottom of the page. "The only way to save victims is to destroy the spiritual thief before it uses the accumulated energy. But this is extremely dangerous, as destroying the creature releases all accumulated magic simultaneously." "What does that mean?" "A magical explosion," Arthur replied grimly. "Powerful enough to destroy everything within several miles radius." They sat in silence, understanding the complexity of the situation. If they didn't stop the creature, it would open a portal to the dark dimension. If they tried to destroy it, they might destroy half of Hogwarts. "Wait," Molly said suddenly. "What if the energy could be controlled during release?" "How?" "Suppose someone created a magical anchor, something that would absorb part of the energy and direct it correctly?" Arthur pondered this. Theoretically possible, but it would require extraordinarily strong and stable magic, and someone would have to sacrifice part of their own energy to create such an anchor. "I can do it," Molly said without hesitation. "What?" "No, it's too dangerous. Arthur, yesterday I created light that repelled this creature. Light that came not from a spell, but from my heart. If I can reach that state again, what if you can't? What if something goes wrong?" Molly looked straight into his eyes. "Then at least I'll know I tried to save Luna. And you. And everyone else." Arthur stared at her for a long time, and Molly could see the struggle in his blue eyes between fear for her and the realization that there was no other way. "All right," he said finally. "But not alone. We'll do this together. Arthur, together, he repeated firmly. Yesterday you said my presence helped you. If that's true, you'll need my support. Molly felt her heart racing, not from fear, but from something else. From the realization that this boy was ready to risk his life for her, and for a child they barely knew. All right, she said quietly. But first we need to learn more about creating a magical anchor. They spent the next 2 hours immersed in ancient tomes. Magical anchors, as it turned out, were a complex form of magic requiring not only power, but also a deep emotional connection with what or whom you wished to protect. Look, Arthur showed her one of the illustrations. It says here that the strongest anchors are created by pairs of wizards who share a deep emotional bond. Love, friendship, family ties. Molly felt her cheeks flush. We've known each other closely for years, but we've never really been close. But in these days we've faced mortal danger together, Arthur said quietly. And we've trusted each other more than I've ever trusted anyone. I've never felt such a connection with anyone before. Their gazes met, and Molly suddenly realized he was right. In these few days, something special had emerged between them. Understanding, trust, a shared purpose. Molly, Arthur began, but suddenly stopped, staring at something behind her shoulder. She turned and saw what made her blood freeze. At the entrance to the restricted section stood a dark figure, not human, but the familiar shadow that constantly changed shape. The spirit thief had found them. It can't enter here, Arthur whispered. The restricted section has its own protective charms. But even as he spoke, the creature slowly advanced, as if the protective charms didn't hinder it. Worse still, it seemed larger than the previous night. Denser, more substantial. It has grown, Molly whispered. Accumulated more magic. The temperature in the section plummeted. Books on shelves began trembling, and some fell to the floor. The spirit thief approached, radiating greed. Not mere hunger, but insatiable thirst for the magical energy it sensed in Molly and Arthur. We need to run, Arthur said, grabbing the book about magical parasites. We won't make it, Molly replied, watching the creature block the only exit from the section. And even if we do, it won't give up. It's hunting us specifically. Molly concentrated, recalling the sensation from the previous night, the warmth that had flared within her when she thought about protecting those she loved. But now it was more difficult. They were in an enclosed space, and the creature had grown stronger. Arthur, she said quietly, you said the strongest magical anchors are created by those who share a deep emotional bond. Yes, but... Take my hand. Without hesitation, he complied, their fingers intertwining as they had the night before. But this time Molly focused not only on protection, but on something deeper. She thought about Luna, the little girl gradually disappearing from this world. About the magical creatures in the forest, stripped of their essence. About everyone who might suffer if the portal to the dark dimension opened. But most importantly, she thought about Arthur. About his determination to help an unknown child. About his readiness to risk everything for her sake. About how his presence made her stronger, more confident, more complete. Golden light flared around their joined hands again, but this time it was different, deeper, warmer, more stable. The spirit thief stopped as if striking an invisible wall. It can't approach, Arthur said in amazement. Because now this isn't just protective light, Molly replied, looking at the creature. It's the bond between us, and our bond gives us strength it cannot steal. The creature circled them, seeking a weakness in their defense. But the light held it at bay, growing brighter with each passing moment. Molly, Arthur said quietly, what you're doing, it's incredible. She turned to him, suddenly realizing how close they stood. His face was mere inches from hers, his eyes gazing directly into hers, and in their depths she saw something that made her heart beat even faster. Arthur, she whispered. I know, he replied just as softly. Suddenly the distance between them vanished. Their lips met in a kiss that was simultaneously tender and desperate, filled with fear for the future and hope that they could save those they loved. The golden light around them blazed with renewed intensity, becoming so bright that the spirit thief hissed and recoiled to the far end of the section. When they finally parted, Molly saw that something had changed. The creature no longer attempted to approach them. It stood at a distance, regarding them with something resembling fear. It's afraid, she said wonderingly. Afraid of what? Our bond. Our magic when we're together. But even as she spoke, the creature began retreating toward the exit. It no longer tried to attack them, it was simply leaving. Where is it going? Arthur asked, and suddenly Molly understood. Her heart froze with terror. To Luna, she whispered. It can't reach us, so it's going for easy prey. For someone already weakened. They rushed toward the exit, but the spirit thief had already vanished into the castle corridors. They could only hope to reach the hospital wing before it finished what it had begun 4 days ago. Time was running out, and Luna Bailey's life hung by a thread. Now Molly and Arthur knew. The battle for her soul would begin tonight. The corridors of Hogwarts had never seemed as long as they did that night, when Molly and Arthur raced toward the hospital wing. Their footsteps echoed on the stone slabs, disturbing the castle's nocturnal silence. Torches on the walls flickered, casting dancing shadows that seemed alive in the light from their wands. Faster, Molly whispered, feeling fear grip her heart like an iron fist. They might be too late. The spirit thief might have already reached Luna. When they reached the hospital wing, the doors were ajar. This was a bad sign. Madame Pomfrey never left the infirmary unlocked at night. Madame Pomfrey? Molly called quietly, entering. Silence answered her. Not ordinary nighttime quiet, but something deeper, more deathly. As if the very life force had been drained from the air. They carefully walked past empty beds toward the corner where Luna lay. What they saw made Molly gasp in horror. The girl lay motionless, but now she was almost transparent. Her outline flickered, as if she weren't quite real, not quite here. Near her bed circled the familiar dark creature, but now it was enormous, nearly twice the size of when they had first seen it. The spirit thief was slowly absorbing the last remnants of Luna's magical essence. With each passing second, the girl became paler, less real. No! Molly screamed, lunging forward. The creature spun sharply toward them. Within its form, ghostly outlines of a human figure could now be discerned, as if someone from very ancient times lived inside the darkness. Eyes burning with cold blue flame looked at them with greed and hatred. Protego Maxima, Molly shouted, creating a powerful protective barrier between them and the creature. But, as before, the spirit thief began absorbing the shield's magic. Golden light flowed toward it in thin streams, and the defensive spell began to weaken. It will drain all the magic from the shield, Arthur warned. Not if I don't let it, Molly replied through gritted teeth. She concentrated not on maintaining the spell, but on something deeper. Recalling that feeling from the library, when their kiss had created light the creature couldn't absorb. Magic that came not from spells, but from the heart itself. But now she needed something more than protection. She needed a weapon. Arthur, she said, not taking her eyes off the spirit thief. The book said it accumulates magic until reaching critical mass. Look at it now. It's almost reached that threshold. Arthur studied the creature carefully. You're right. See how it pulses? As if preparing for something big. For opening the portal. But what if we could force it to release all its energy prematurely? How? Molly extended her hand to Arthur. Do you trust me? Always. Their fingers intertwined, and the familiar warm light flared around them again. But this time Molly didn't use it for defense. Instead, she directed the light forward like a spear, straight into the creature's heart. The spirit thief shrieked, a sound like wind passing through empty graves. It tried to absorb their attack, but couldn't. The light born of their bond was poison to it, not food. The creature retreated, but didn't flee. Instead, it began expanding, growing ever larger. The air around it began crackling with magical tension. It's preparing, Arthur whispered. About to open the portal. We won't let it, Molly said firmly. She closed her eyes and concentrated on everything dear to her. On Luna, who was dying just feet away from her. On Arthur, who had entrusted her with his life. On all the Hogwarts students sleeping in their dormitories, unaware of the danger. And most importantly, on the feeling that caring for others, protecting the weak, wasn't just duty but her true calling. The light around her and Arthur intensified, transforming from golden to pure white. But this time she didn't direct it at the creature. Instead, she began weaving from it something more complex, a magical anchor that would hold Luna's soul when the spirit thief was destroyed. What are you doing? Arthur asked, feeling part of his own magical strength flowing to her. Creating a connection with Luna, Molly replied, feeling tension building in her body. Something that will keep her soul in this world even when the magical energy explodes. She extended her free hand toward Luna's ethereal form. At the moment of contact, she felt cold that penetrated to her bones. But she also felt something else, a weak spark of warmth deep within the girl. Her soul was still there, just nearly severed from the physical world. Luna, Molly whispered. I know you can hear me. Hold on. Don't let go. White threads of light flowed from Molly to Luna, enveloping the girl in a protective web. But the process was draining enormous amounts of Molly's strength. She felt her own magical essence flowing out with the light. "Molly, stop," Arthur said with concern. "You're giving too much of yourself." "I have no choice," she replied, her voice growing weaker. "This is the only way to save her." The spirit thief, seeing its final victim being taken away, lunged at them with the fury of despair. But instead of trying to absorb their magic, it began releasing all its accumulated energy at once. The hospital wing filled with blinding light and deafening roar. Magical energy gathered from dozens of victims over weeks exploded with the force of a tornado. Windows shattered, walls began cracking, and the very air around them caught fire. "Everything's going to collapse," Arthur shouted, trying to be heard over the rumble. Molly knew he was right. The explosion was too powerful. It wouldn't just destroy the hospital wing, it could bring down the entire castle. But she also knew what to do. "Arthur," she screamed, "give me all your strength. All of it." "What? Now? Trust me." Arthur didn't hesitate. He gripped her hand tightly and opened his mind, allowing her to reach the deepest sources of his magic. Molly felt his power pouring into her, amplifying her own to an incredible level. And then she did something that defied all laws of magic. Instead of trying to contain the explosion or redirect it somewhere, she absorbed it. All the magical energy released by the spirit thief flowed into her. The power of dozens of victims, accumulated over weeks, entered her body and soul. She felt all this energy could tear her apart. But she also felt something else. Within all this accumulated magic were fragments of souls, pieces of those from whom the spirit thief had stolen magic, including Luna. With incredible effort of will, Molly began separating this energy, returning each fragment to its rightful owner. To Luna, her voice and magical strength. To the magical creatures in the forest, their natural essence. To all other victims, what had been taken from them. The process was painful beyond description. Molly felt her own soul stretching to its limits. Blood flowed from her nose, and her vision blurred. "Molly!" Arthur cried, feeling her weakening. But she couldn't stop. Not while Luna still needed help. Focusing on the girl, Molly began returning everything that had been stolen from her. Magic, life force, her very voice. White threads of light connecting them blazed like small suns. And suddenly Luna's transparent form began solidifying. Her outlines became clearer, her skin regained color, and her eyes, the spark of life. What happened?" the girl whispered, and these were the first words she had spoken in 5 days. But the effort proved too great. Molly felt her strength leaving her and began to fall. Only Arthur's strong arms kept her from hitting the floor. "I've got you," he whispered. "You did it. You saved her." Molly smiled weakly, looking at Luna, who now sat on her bed, looking around with eyes full of life and understanding. But their joy was short-lived. Residual magical energy still crackled in the air, and Molly understood that the explosion had only been partially absorbed. The remaining energy was still powerful enough to damage the castle. "Arthur," she said weakly, "there's going to be a second explosion. Smaller, but still dangerous. What do we do?" Molly looked around. The hospital wing was nearly destroyed, but the walls still held. If they could direct the residual energy upward, through the roof, it would dissipate in the sky without causing harm. "Help me stand," she requested. Arthur supported her, and together they raised their wands upward. The last of their strength, amplified by invisible threads still connecting them after all they'd been through, created a narrow channel of pure magical energy. The residual explosion force flowed up through this channel, broke through the hospital wing roof, and burst into the night sky, where it dissolved among the stars like a giant firework. When everything ended, silence fell over the hospital wing. True silence, not the ominous emptiness the spirit thief had brought with it. The silence of peace and safety. "Molly? Arthur?" Luna called quietly. "What happened? Why can't I remember anything from the past few days?" Molly sat on the edge of the girl's bed, still holding Arthur's hand for support. "It's a long story," she said gently. "But the most important thing, you're safe. You can speak again, and your magic has returned." Luna looked at her carefully. "You saved me, didn't you? You risked your lives for me." "We couldn't do otherwise," Molly replied, feeling tears rise to her eyes. Not from sadness, but from an overwhelming sense of rightness in everything that had happened. Caring for those who need help, it's not duty. It's calling. At that moment, Madame Pomfrey burst into the hospital wing, awakened by the noise of the explosion. Seeing the destroyed infirmary and 3 students sitting among the debris, she was initially speechless. What happened here? Luna, child, you can speak. Long story, Molly repeated, feeling exhaustion finally taking over. But everything's all right now. Luna is healthy. The following hours passed in a whirlwind of explanations, questioning, and medical examinations. Professor Dumbledore arrived immediately after Madame Pomfrey, and his usually calm eyes blazed with interest and concern as he listened to their story. Spirit thief, he repeated thoughtfully when they finished. I've read about such creatures in very ancient books, but considered them legends. You've done something extraordinarily dangerous, but also extraordinarily brave. We couldn't wait, Arthur defended. Luna was dying, and with each hour the creature grew stronger. Dumbledore nodded. And you made the right decision. Though, of course, next time it would be better to inform adults before embarking on such dangerous adventures. Next time? Molly asked in surprise. Oh, Miss Prewett, the headmaster smiled. After what you demonstrated today, I strongly doubt this was your last encounter with dark forces. You both possess a rare gift, not only magical power, but the courage to use it in defense of others. When all the adults finally left and Luna was moved to a new, undamaged bed, Molly and Arthur found themselves alone among the debris of the former hospital wing. We really did it, Arthur said quietly. Yes, Molly replied, but not me, not you. We together. She looked at him, realizing how much had changed in these few days. Arthur, whom she had known only as a quiet classmate, had now become her partner, her confidant, the one with whom she could share her deepest powers. Molly, Arthur said quietly, what happened between us in the library during the battle? I know, she replied, feeling herself blushing again. And I don't regret it. He smiled, the first genuine, full smile in all these tense days. I don't regret it either. Actually, I hope this is just the beginning. Molly nodded, looking through the destroyed roof at the starry sky. Somewhere out there, the last energy of the spirit thief had dissipated, transforming into harmless light. Luna slept peacefully in her bed, her breathing steady and strong. And beside Molly sat the boy who had entrusted her with his life and helped her realize her true calling. Yes, she said quietly. I hope this is just the beginning too. And when the first rays of dawn began breaking through the destroyed roof, Molly felt her heart overflow with hope. The story with the spirit thief was finished, but their own story was just beginning. And she knew it would be a beautiful story, a story of love, partnership, and endless care for those who needed help. The battle for Luna's soul was won. But Molly knew this was only the first of many battles they would fight together. The week following the battle with the spirit thief passed in a strange mixture of familiarity and unfamiliarity. Life at Hogwarts gradually returned to its usual rhythm. Students attended classes, completed homework, argued about Quidditch. But for Molly, Arthur, and Luna, everything had changed forever. The hospital wing was repaired in a single night. Magic allowed for such miracles, but the memory of that terrible night remained, especially in the eyes of the 3 who had lived through it together. Molly woke early, as had become her habit in recent days. Sleep came to her with difficulty. Every time she closed her eyes, that moment when she absorbed the spirit thief's magical energy appeared before her. The sensation of all that accumulated power flowing through her still frightened her. But at the same time, she felt something new, a deep understanding of who she was and what she wanted from life. She rose quietly so as not to wake her sleeping roommates and decided to go to the library. There she could always find peace for reflection. The castle corridors were empty at this early hour, with only torches crackling quietly on the walls. In the library, Molly chose a table by the large windows through which soft morning light streamed. November had fully claimed its rights. The trees on the school grounds stood nearly bare, their branches black against the gray morning sky. But there was something calming in this autumn picture, something that reminded her of life's cyclical nature, that after every ending comes a new beginning. Quiet footsteps interrupted her thoughts. Molly turned and saw Luna Bailey carefully approaching her table. The girl looked much better than she had a week ago. Her cheeks had regained their healthy pink tint, and her blue eyes sparkled with life. But in her posture there was still a certain uncertainty, as if she didn't quite believe everything had really ended well. Sorry to disturb you so early, Luna said quietly, approaching closer. It's just, I couldn't sleep. And I knew you also wake up early. Molly smiled, gesturing for the girl to sit across from her. Of course. Would you like some tea? She drew her wand and whispered a spell that conjured a small teapot and 2 cups. Over this past week, she had noticed that her magic had become stronger, more stable, as if the ordeal she had endured had tempered her magical abilities. Luna carefully took her cup, settling more comfortably at the table. Molly, I wanted to thank you. Not just for saving me, but for how you did it. What do you mean? I remember some moments from the time when I was disappearing. Luna spoke slowly, searching for the right words. It was like finding yourself in dark water that gradually pulls you to the bottom. I felt part of me disappearing each day. Molly gripped her cup tightly, remembering that horrible sensation of emptiness she had felt when touching Luna's aura. But then, the girl continued, I felt warmth. Light that pulled me back, and a voice that told me to hold on, not to let go. That was your voice, wasn't it? Molly nodded, not trusting her voice. You risked your life for me, for a child you barely knew. Why? This was the question Molly had pondered all week. Why had she so decisively rushed to save Luna? Why had she been ready to sacrifice herself for someone she hardly spoke with? Because it was right, she finally said. Because every life is precious. Because. She paused, searching for words to express a feeling she had long been unable to articulate. Because caring for others isn't duty or a rule. It's what makes us truly human. Luna looked at her carefully with her large blue eyes. Are you going to become a healer after Hogwarts? Molly blinked in surprise. A healer? No, I always planned to become an Auror, to fight dark wizards. But you are a healer, Luna said gently. Perhaps not in the traditional sense, but you heal not just the body. You heal the soul. These words struck Molly like lightning. She had never thought of herself as a healer, but now, when Luna said it, she suddenly understood. Perhaps the girl was right. Perhaps Molly's true strength lay not in combat magic, not in the ability to defeat enemies, but in the ability to protect, to guard, to restore to life what seemed lost. Luna, she said quietly. Thank you. Thank you for those words. The girl smiled, the first genuine smile in many days. And I thank you for life. When Luna left, Molly sat by the window for a long time, pondering her words. A healer. Not the type of healer who works at St. Mungo's, treating magical injuries and illnesses, but one who heals something deeper, fear, despair, lost hope. Later that day, she met Arthur in the library. He sat at the same table where they had first researched information about magical creatures together, but now completely different books lay before him. What are you reading? She asked, settling beside him. Books about magical law, he replied, looking up, and about working at the Ministry of Magic. Molly raised her eyebrows in surprise. The Ministry? I thought you wanted to study magical creatures. Arthur set aside his book and turned to face her fully. You know, after everything that happened, I realized something important. The spirit thief existed only because someone once created it in a dark experiment. And then knowledge about it was forbidden and forgotten. And what if this knowledge hadn't been forbidden, but instead studied and systematized? What if there were a service that specifically dealt with such cases? Molly, how many people could have been saved if someone knew how to fight such creatures? Molly pondered his words. You want to create something new at the Ministry? Exactly. A department for defense against forgotten threats. Or something similar. A place where information about such cases would be collected, ancient texts studied, people prepared to encounter unknown dangers. There was such passion, such certainty in his voice that Molly couldn't help but smile. That's a wonderful idea, Arthur. But will the Ministry listen to you? You're just finishing school. Perhaps not immediately, he admitted. But I'm prepared to work toward this for years. Start from the bottom, prove my competence, find like-minded people. He paused, looking directly into her eyes. Molly, what if we do this together? Together? You have incredible talent for defensive magic. And after what you did with the spirit thief, Molly, you saved not just Luna. You saved all of us. People like you are what my department needs. Molly felt her heart racing, not just from the proposal, but from how Arthur looked at her. In his eyes she read not only professional admiration for her abilities, but something much deeper. Arthur, she said quietly, what about us? I mean, what happened between us? He reached out and took her hand in his. The same warmth that had flared between them during the battle again passed through her skin. What happened between us, Molly, is the best thing that's ever happened to me in life, he said quietly. And I want this to be not just in work. I want to build a future with you, both as work partners and as something more. Molly felt warmth spreading across her cheeks. Something more? Instead of answering, he leaned over and kissed her. Gently, tenderly, completely unlike that desperate kiss in the restricted section of the library. This kiss spoke not of fear and despair, but of hope and future. When they finally separated, Molly saw that several students at other tables were watching them with interest and smiles. She felt embarrassed, but didn't pull away from Arthur. "Yes," she whispered. "Something more." The following weeks flew by quickly. Molly and Arthur spent almost all their free time together, discussing future plans, researching work possibilities at the ministry, and also simply getting to know each other. Things they hadn't managed to learn during their years of studying in the same class. It turned out that Arthur had a wonderful sense of humor when he relaxed, that he could talk for hours about magical creatures, and each of his stories was captivating, that he loved long walks along the lake shore and could accurately determine a person's mood by their magical aura. And Arthur learned that Molly was actually very sentimental, despite her determined appearance, that she read poetry before bed and knew dozens of poems by heart, that her favorite color wasn't red, as one might think from her red hair, but deep golden, the color of sunlight on water. The professors also noticed changes in both students. Professor McGonagall detained Molly after class one day. "Miss Prewett," she said when the classroom emptied, "I want to talk to you about your plans after graduation." "Yes, Professor? I heard you and Mr. Weasley planned to work at the ministry, in some new department." Molly nodded, wondering how McGonagall knew this. "It's a commendable goal," the professor continued, "but I want to ensure you understand your own talents. What you demonstrated during recent events isn't just powerful magic, Miss Prewett. It's a rare gift." "What gift, Professor?" McGonagall looked at her for a long time, as if weighing how much she could say. "The ability to heal not just the body, but the soul. To restore to life what seemed lost. This is a very rare and very valuable talent. Don't waste it." "I don't intend to, Professor. On the contrary, I want to use it to help others." "Good. Very good." McGonagall rarely smiled, but now warmth appeared on her face. "And Miss Prewett, if you and Mr. Weasley really create this new department, know that you will have the school's support. Hogwarts has always supported its graduates who dedicate their lives to protecting others." That same evening, Molly told Arthur about the conversation. They sat in the Gryffindor common room by the fireplace, which crackled with cheerful flames. Most students had already gone to sleep, so they could speak freely. "McGonagall is right," Arthur said, gazing into the fire. "You really do have a rare gift, and I'm happy I'll be able to work alongside you." "And I'm happy I'll be able to work alongside you," Molly replied. "You know, sometimes it seems to me that everything that happened with the spirit thief didn't happen by accident, as if fate brought us together." Arthur turned to her. "Do you believe in fate?" "I don't know, but I believe that some things make sense. And the fact that we found each other exactly when we both needed it most, that can't be mere coincidence." He took her hand in his, intertwining their fingers. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we really are meant to be together." Time until graduation flew by quickly. Molly was surprised to realize she would miss leaving Hogwarts. These ancient walls, these corridors, this atmosphere of magic and knowledge, all of it had become part of her. A few days before graduation, Luna came to her again. This time the girl didn't look worried or sad. On the contrary, her eyes shone with excitement. She found Molly in the same library, at the same table by the window. "Molly," she said, approaching with a radiant smile, "I have a gift for you." "A gift?" "Luna, you don't have to." "I do," the girl interrupted firmly. "You saved me, gave me back my life. This is the least I can do." She pulled a small object wrapped in a soft velvet pouch from her pocket. When Molly unwrapped it, inside was a thin silver chain with a pendant shaped like a small sun, inlaid with tiny golden stones. "This is beautiful," Molly whispered. "Luna, this is too expensive." "It's not an ordinary decoration," the girl said. "I made it myself, using magic I learned in my research. Do you see these stones? They store light. Your light. My light. A piece of the energy you used to save me. Now it will always be with you. And if you ever find yourself in darkness, if you're scared or lonely, just touch the pendant, and it will remind you how strong and good you are." Molly felt tears rising to her eyes. She carefully put on the chain, and immediately felt a barely noticeable warmth near her heart. "Thank you," she said quietly. "This is the best gift I've ever received." "And I thank you," Luna replied, "for showing me what true care means. I'll never forget this." Graduation day arrived too quickly and too slowly at once. Molly woke with the feeling that this was the last morning of her school life. She rose early, as always, and went out onto the Gryffindor Tower balcony, to look at Hogwarts one last time from this vantage point. The castle lay before her in the morning silence, its towers and walls seeming golden in the light of the rising sun. The lake sparkled like a mirror, and the forbidden forest stretched as a dark band to the horizon. Somewhere there, in the forest's depths, she and Arthur had first encountered the spirit thief. Somewhere there began the story that changed their lives forever. Thinking about the same thing, she heard a familiar voice. Arthur stood in the balcony doorway, his red hair disheveled, and in his eyes was the same mixture of sadness and anticipation as in hers. About what exactly? She asked, though she knew the answer. About how quickly everything changed. A month ago we were just classmates. And now we're partners. In every sense of the word. He approached her, embracing her from behind. Molly leaned into him, feeling his warmth and strength. I'm a little nervous, she admitted. This whole plan with the new department. What if it doesn't work out? What if the ministry doesn't want to listen to us? Then we'll try differently, Arthur replied calmly. We'll create a private organization, or go work in other countries, or come up with something completely different. The main thing is, we'll do it together. Molly turned in his embrace, looking into his eyes. Arthur, she said quietly, I want to confess something to you. What? When I was little, I dreamed of becoming the most powerful witch in the world. I wanted everyone to fear and respect me. I thought strength was the ability to defeat others. And now I know that true strength is the ability to protect those you love. It's the readiness to sacrifice yourself for others. She touched Luna's pendant on her chest. It's the light you carry within yourself and share with others. Arthur kissed her tenderly. And that's exactly why I fell in love with you. Fell in love, she whispered. Yes, completely and forever. Molly's heart beat faster. I love you too, Arthur, and I'm ready to build a future with you. They stood on the balcony, embracing and looking at the castle that had given them so many memories. Ahead lay an unknown future, full of challenges and opportunities. But now they knew, whatever happened, they would overcome it together. You know, Molly said when they finally returned to the castle to prepare for the graduation ceremony. I think caring for others really will become the foundation of our life. Not just in work, but in everything else. What do you mean? Molly smiled, imagining the distant future. Well, maybe someday we'll have children of our own. And we'll teach them the same thing, that true strength lies not in being the strongest, but in protecting those who need protection. Arthur smiled broadly. I like this idea. I like it very much. As they walked through Hogwarts corridors for the last time as students, Molly felt her heart overflow with hope. The story with the spirit thief was finished, but their own story was just beginning. And she knew it would be a beautiful story, a story of love, partnership, and endless care for those who needed help. In the pocket of her robes lay a letter of acceptance for work at the Ministry of Magic, for now just an ordinary position, but it was a beginning. And on her neck shone a small silver amulet that reminded her of the power of light she carried within herself. The future awaited, and it promised to be bright.